Welcome, dear friends, fans, and followers, aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty Leadership Interview Series, where today we will look at what makes leaders great leaders. And when you die, here's the question: will you be forgotten, or will someone or something carry your legacy? I'm your host, Dov Barron, founder of FullMontyLeadership.com, one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers to hire, executive mentor, Entrepreneur Magazine contributor, and international business speaker. If you're a new listener, a new viewer to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us such a big hit, making us the number one podcast for Fortune 500 and keeping us right at the top with so many categories: leadership, next generation leadership, human resources, and a bunch of other great categories. Thank you so much for sharing the show with everyone you know. And remember, as always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's dive in. All right, what makes leaders great? Are they born that way? Or was it something that you'd never even expect? Well, my guest today is Bernie Swain. He is the co-founder and chairman of the Washington Speakers Bureau. Now, if you wonder what that is the largest speaking agency in the world, having represented the last 4 British prime ministers, 3 of the last 4 presidents of the United States, and many other high-profile speakers, countless American and world leaders, business and economic visionaries, journalists, authors, and sports legend. Today, Bernie Swain is the author of a new book, What Made Me Who I Am, and remains the chairman of the Washington Speakers Bureau. He says when you actually get to know some of these highly successful and highly accomplished people the way that he has, you will often find that there was a turning point in their life. Bernie says, success and accomplishment don't happen in a vacuum. They raise from experiences that have had a profound and lasting influence on the person's life. If you want to find out more about Bernie Swain and about his book, you can go to bernieswain.com. We're going to post that for you, but it is BernieSwain.com. You can find out more about him there. But for now, let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Bernie Swain. Welcome, Bernie. Good to have you here, man.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure, mate. Real pleasure to have you here. So, I just told everybody that, you started the Washington Speakers Bureau, and that's sort of starting at the top because you're already there. You've already been that guy. But, as much as there is a fabulous story there of all these amazing and influential people that you've known and that you've spoken with and you've gotten to know very personally, you didn't start out at the top. Tell us a little bit about how your Speakers Bureau got started.
Well, I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I was 16 years old. I had one of those influences in life is a mentor, somebody, a teacher, a person that comes into your life. I had one of those mentors when I was in high school. He was a teacher, he was the football coach, and no one in my family had ever gone to college before. My mother's side of the family were farmers. My father's side of the family grew up in the poorest town of West Virginia. And so he encouraged me to go to college, and I very much wanted to be just like him. So I got a degree in education. I went back to a junior high school that I taught at, became a teacher there and a football coach, went back to get a master's degree. And upon getting a master's degree, the university hired me as their intramural director in charge of general sports recreation for the general population of students. The school built a new field house. I became the assistant athletic director. And then 5 years later, my boss retired. And at 36 years old, I had my dream job, far exceeding the expectations of that 16-year-old boy. I was going to be the athletic director of a major university, and I quit and walked away to the surprise of my colleagues and friends.
At 36, so you've reached the pinnacle of your career. Everybody's like, wow, and I'm sure even your family, and you decided to walk away. Why?
Right. Well, a friend of mine sent me an article in Fortune magazine, and in the article it was about a lecture agency in New York City, and it was the Harry Walker Agency. At the time, it was the largest lecture agency in the world, and Harry Walker just walked into the Ford White House and picked up Henry Kissinger and Gerald Ford and Alexander Haig as clients. And near the end of the article, Henry Kissinger is arguing with Walker, saying, "Why should I pay you a 33% commission rate? Why don't I go with one of your competitors?" And Harry Walker says in the article, "I have no competitors." So I took the article home. I left it on my coffee table, and a couple days later, my wife read the article, and she says, "Gee, there's no competitors." Now, back then, there was no internet. So other than looking at that article and believing what somebody said in a magazine, we had no idea whether he had any competitors or it was a strategic boast.
So fact-checking was a bit of an issue.
It was. And so my wife pushed at me. She said, you come home 2 or 3 times a week and you complain about the bureaucracy of university life. And yes, you're doing very well, but at some point you're going to be complaining and frustrated with the life you're leading. And I don't think you're ever going to be happy until you can do something on your own. So she pushed and she prodded, and we walked away from my career. She quit her job. We had a 1-year-old baby. I had no money saved. I had a $60,000 house on which I had a mortgage. In order to start the Speakers Bureau, I had to get a second mortgage, which now meant I had $55,000 of mortgages on a $60,000 house at over 12% interest. I had no money to get an office. So a friend of mine had a stationery closet, and he promised me, he said, "I'll rent you the stationery closet." And so my wife and I moved into a stationery closet. And to give you an idea of what it was like in there, in order to leave the stationery closet, you had to walk through this guy's office and then out through the secretary's office and out the building. So if he was having a meeting, you'd have to sit in your stationery closet and wait until he was finished. At the same time, my wife got pregnant again, so that made it interesting being in the stationery closet.
A pregnant woman's bladder in a stationary office. So there's no windows, and the only door is out through everybody else's. And
right.
the office you rented, I mean, people don't know this, but the office, let me rephrase that. The stationary closet you rented was in the office of somebody who would become a very big name in and of himself.
He was. His name was Chuck Hagel. He went on later to become Secretary of Defense. And so Chuck rented us the stationery closet, and we sat in that stationery closet for 12 months. Not representing anybody. And the idea back then with no internet was that you would try to think of a famous name and you would try to find a telephone number of an office or an address. None of our phone calls for 12 months were ever returned. And then our letters were returned by lawyers saying, "Don't interfere with a written contract. My client, this famous person, is represented by another agency and you don't interfere with it." That's how we discovered there were 5 or 6 big agencies in addition to Harry Walker. So now after 12 months, quitting our jobs, ending our career, 12 months, we're sitting in the closet, not representing anybody, and we're within 2 months of running out of money.
Wow. So, I mean, you said you got a young child, you got a second one on the way, you're quite literally in the closet, but not in the way we tend to think of it today. You and your wife are working in the closet. In the closet of the man who will become the Secretary of State at a later date. I mean, it's somewhat comedic because it's this wonderful incubator because you're, to use my term, you're in the resonance of greatness. Chuck Hagel is going to become massive. You're reaching out to these people, but you're seeing nothing. Before we even go to a turning point, how did you keep going? I mean, that 12 months, pregnant wife, second baby on the way, double mortgage. How do you keep going? Because so many of our viewers and so many of our listeners, are following their dream. They are pursuing something that, maybe like yourself, walked away from something that everybody else is like, you're insane for leaving. But they're at that very point you were at where it goes, I don't know if we can keep going. I really don't know if we can keep going. How did you keep going for that 12 months?
Well, I think that the idea of first is that you start out with some kind of passion for what you want to do. Paula, my wife, identified a passion in me that I wanted to make decisions on my own. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to have some accomplishment and success on my own. I wanted to build something. It was built into me that I wanted to succeed. I had had some accomplishment in athletics. I was doing well. I'd had success at the university, but the idea of being able to do it on my own without interference, and the idea of having a passion about doing something is so much more important than thinking about, well, I have a talent or I have a plan to do it. Mm-hmm. Every morning I could have failed. I didn't have any success for 12 months, but every morning I woke up excited about a new day because I had a passion thinking, it's just around the corner. This is going to happen. I'm just not going to give up. And I think people today, the problem I find with a lot of entrepreneurs is that we too quickly give up. There are secrets to becoming an entrepreneur, and everything I learned backwards. I learned by failure. So right. I failed, and I had to find something creative to do to overcome that failure, and that's the way I learned. But you're better off having some experience and some plan and some strategic idea of what you're doing going into it. But you can't succeed today unless you have a passion for it. And if you're too easily want to give up, then you don't have the passion to do it.
Yeah. I've said for years that, there's a lot of people think that if you have a passion for things will flow to you. And that's certainly not always the case initially. But the people I know who have a passion are also tremendous hustlers in that they're driving towards it every single day. And often people will look in and sort of say, well, you're behaving a lot like a workaholic. And they right. just don't understand that that's the passion. That's not workaholism. That's the love of what I'm doing in spite of the results. So right. that's the difference, I think.
The first 5 years of being in business, that was the argument between my wife and I. It was like, well, we've been working hard. Let's go on vacation. I would say, I can't go on vacation. I can't leave. I can't walk out and have something happen the minute I walk out. It's the success we have is too precious to risk it. So, you're right. I don't think you can ever. I've been in business for 35 years. I don't take anything for granted anymore. No. I'm not going to go on vacation and not be available to take care of something that I have to take care of, because you don't lose that passion. It isn't something that lasts for 6 months and you kind of let it go.
Right. Well, if it wasn't really your passion.
It wasn't. Right.
So like I said, you're in this closet, Chuck Hagel's stationary closet. It's 12 months. All those things are happening. But, your whole point in this book is that there is these turning points, these things where things shift. What was the turning point for you in that situation?
Well, when I was at the university, I helped a guy named Steve Bell, who was he was the anchorman for Good Morning America back in 1980. And I had helped Steve use the swimming pool at the university, and Steve had been under contract with Harry Walker, which was the agency which we read the article about. Mm-hmm. And the two-year contract was up, and they hadn't produced. So Steve called me on the phone after 14 months and said, "I'd love to let you represent me." Now, it sounds like a big turning point, but at the same point, the big agencies we were competing against represented 24 very famous people, and we represent now Steve Bell, who hasn't been able to get work for 2 months with the largest agency in the world. And so you have one tiny product compared to big products that other people have.
Right.
And so you're talking about how you learn backwards. Everybody in the industry is signed to a 1 or 2 year contract, and you do that because you tie them up and you don't want to risk losing them. And so I made an agreement. I shook hands with Steve, and I forgot to sign him to a 2 year contract or any written contract. Mm-hmm. And I told my wife Paula, I said, we got Steve Bell's agreed to go with us. We finally got a speaker. We may have had some progress, and she asked about the contract, and I said, "Oh my God, I forgot to sign a contract." But you can't go back on somebody and say, "Hey, now I want you to sign a piece of paper." And so I lived with it. And what happened was that Steve then went to other journalists in Washington, D.C. that he was good friends with and said, "I just signed by handshake an agreement with this little speakers bureau that has me as their only speaker, and you could do the same thing and walk away from it anytime you want." And so within 2 years, we had 3 or 4 well-known journalists in Washington, D.C. come to us on handshake. Mm-hmm. And what that meant, yes, they could walk away from us, but at the same time, it meant to us we had to work really hard to keep them happy. And so what that did was that instilled in our company unknowingly a foundation of trust.
Yeah.
So that now you're not depending on pieces of paper. And for 35 years, I have never signed a speaker to a written contract, including 3 of the last 4 presidents and including 5 prime ministers of England and world leaders, and no one.
Wow. That's amazing, especially in this world that tends to want to do that and nail everybody down. That's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing.
And you do have to sign written contracts. I mean, I've got employee contracts. You have to do that because the city or the state requires you to do that. And vendors come to us, and of course they want contracts, and they're not going to say, well, I trust you and you trust me. They don't really buy into it, but at the same time, my employees buy into it. They know when I sign something, if I sign a written contract with them, I'm going to exceed their expectations on that written contract because I'm not going to adhere to the written word on a piece of paper. And the same with the speakers I've represented. I haven't lost a speaker in 35 years, and only because that I care about them and I'm going to work really hard. And my attitude hasn't changed since I sat in that closet.
Well, I can tell you that as a speaker who's had to deal with speakers bureaus, that's not a usual experience. So that's pretty great stuff. I can say that, firsthand experience.
Well, I think it's important with any company. You build a trust with your customers, you build a trust with your employees. That's the only thing you have to hold on to when you have a relationship with people and you're trying to build a network and build an entrepreneurial company on your own.
Yeah, and that is a piece that's so often missed, is the understanding that, we talk a lot about trust. I don't care what business you're in, everybody talks a good talk around trust, but so few people are willing to be the one who is willing to put it on the line, the way you did, not signing, not creating a contract and continuing to not do that. That putting it on the line, but we kind of expect them to trust us, but we don't give them a reason to trust us. So, I love that you did that, and I think it's a great message for people in business, and I think it's a tremendous message certainly for us as leaders and as entrepreneurs, is to grasp this understanding that if we want them to trust us, we have to trust them first. And I think that's powerful and important.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you can read an article about leadership and business and stuff like that, and it's got 1 through 10 listed there, and you say, oh, I love that stuff. But if you don't buy into it, if you don't really live it, having an era of trust, an idea of trust, changes your whole attitude about the way you approach life. It's not like, well, are we tied into this guy? That attitude goes out the window. It is, what am I going to do for that guy? Am I going to take care of that guy? Can he trust me? Am I going to help him?
For me, and this is my approach to business, it's my approach to leadership, and it's my approach to my life. And that is that everything is a relationship. And no relationship will ever truly work without trust, but that trust is fragile. And therefore, I'm always on the edge that I want to nurture and take care of the trust. Because, and there was one of the things we teach the leaders that we work with, you are going to break my trust. I am going to break your trust. There's no way around it. Something I might do that without ever considering that it would harm you or hurt you might hurt you. But I've got to build enough in that account of trust that you can see that as a blip rather than as a characteristic. And that's the key, and that's the point of being so totally focused on the trust piece that I love about what you're doing and how you approach that. And of course that's, I'm sure, has become the breeding ground for business in what you do.
Right, and my industry is not one known for its honesty and its good care for people. I mean, we're on the East Coast equivalent to what is on the West Coast for talent agencies.
Yeah.
And there have been times in my life where I said, gee, we're having some success, and I'm not going to let anything get in the way of that success. And then you kind of have to bring yourself back and put yourself back on the foundation and good footing again, because it's easy to lose sight of what you're doing if if you get away from that idea that people are trusting you and you have to trust other people.
So in all the years of having this agency, which is still the biggest one in the world, you've obviously had the opportunity to get to know some amazing people. And, you said in your book that when you really listen to these people, you hear, these people who are incredibly successful and accomplished, that there's a turning point in their life. There's inspirational stories. There are things that become as you said, the beacon of light, not just for them, but for all of us. Your title of your book, tell me how that ties into that.
Well, one of the people who came on board with the handshake was Alex Haley. And Alex used to come, Alex was the great author of Roots. And Alex used to come and sit in my office all the time, and he loved to talk about family, and he would spend an hour or 2 hours in there talking all the time. And he often repeated a phrase to me: when an old person dies, it's like a library burning. And, he said it to me so often, I didn't quite, I kind of just put it aside. I didn't pay much attention to it. And then I started finally thinking about it. And the point he was trying to make was that we all have experiences in life, and those experiences are like pages in a book. And those experiences are the influences in our lives, the defining moments, the turning points in our lives. And they can make us stronger, and they can make us wiser if we pay attention to them. They can contribute to our success and our accomplishment in life if we pay attention to them. And that's what he was trying to say to me. He says, don't lose sight just because you're a lecture agent or you're trying to continually sign new people and build a company. Don't lose sight of what is sitting on top of your desk, and that is the fact that you're representing these great people, and you could take advantage of the knowledge that they have and pay attention to them. So he wanted me to separate what they are in professional life to what they in personal life. So I spent a long time trying to learn about them on a personal level, spending more time on a personal level with them and letting them know on a personal level what me and my family was like at the same time. And that's how the book kind of got a germ of an idea, was that I started learning that a lot of these people come from humble and modest beginnings, much like we do.
Right.
And my idea of how they got successful was totally wrong. They weren't given, that golden spoon, or they weren't given money, or some big guy didn't call and say, hey, make this person Secretary of State. No. They earned it because they learned lessons from the people in their lives, either an event in their life or a person or a place in their life, and that's what made them great. And while you and I may not be Secretary of State, we go through that same idea of learning from the experiences and the people that are in our lives. And so, and it just makes us stronger and better kind of a person in order to do that. And that was kind of the idea behind the book.
Well, first of all, I guess I want to congratulate you because I believe you're in the second printing. You're in the second printing of the book within a month or something, which is insane. That's right. So huge congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I know a lot of best-selling authors who would dream of that, so that's pretty awesome to start.
Well, they did order. They didn't order a lot of books, thinking, well, they're not sure this is going to be good, because I am an unknown. I've spent 30-some years behind the podium, hiding, never talking to the press ever, because it was never my job to talk to the press. I mean, I didn't interfere with their lives because I did my job. That was part of what you learned by having trust, somebody putting a trust in you, is that you did what you were supposed to do and you didn't interfere with other things.
So I want to ask you a question from the position of what it is you were doing, because I'm hearing something here and I want to sort of dig into it a little bit. And that is this. You represent some really big names. And I wonder, is that the qualification for taking on a speaker?
No.
So, yeah, that's what I would have thought. So tell us about that.
I mean, obviously you have to, because you have to have all kinds of speakers, because, if you're doing big conferences, you certainly want to represent a president of the United States or a prime minister or somebody like that. That's obvious. But, we're finding people all the time that, and people ask me, well, how do you become a really good speaker? And it's exactly what we look for. Somebody who can talk from their own experiences. If they learn something unique in life, you can become, I'm not a good speaker, but now I have to go out and I have to do some speeches. And I'm talking from the heart, and that's the only reason I can do half decent job of it, because I'm talking from my own experiences.
Right.
So I found a lot of people. I represented a girl named Liz Murray, and Liz is in the book, and she was homeless, on the subways of New York City as a teenager. Her parents were heroin addicts, and they died, and her sister lived with the grandfather, and he was abusive, and she didn't want to live with him, so she got with this group of people that were homeless and living on the streets of New York City, and she had given up high school, and she found one teacher. She said she had this idea in her head, what if my life was to change? What if I didn't ride the subways every day? And so she tried to get back into high school, and the schools in New York City wouldn't let her back in because she'd already missed a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And so she found one teacher who had started this special school for kids who had dropped out. And she was late for the appointment, and he pushed her and got her back into school again. And the bottom line is, he made her work so hard that she ended up going to Harvard and graduating from Harvard. And that was within 3 years of riding the subways. And I've represented people who were prisoners of war, or captured somewhere, or did something special, or just were totally unique in what they had to say and do. So you look for the quality of the life, rather than the title of the person.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for me, I'm just, in my mind, I'm running this parallel, and the parallel is this, is that here's you 30 plus years ago, an unknown, and somebody who is a reasonably major player says, yeah, I'll come with you on a handshake, and then you become the big player. But it's that willingness, I think it's on both sides, and I think that a lot of people miss that. It's the willingness to be able to see something in somebody when they're not at that place, that willingness to see that greatness within them. I'm very blessed, like yourself. I've met some amazing people, had some outstanding mentors in my life, and every now and then, I recently was in New York, and I had 2 full days, 14 meetings booked, meeting people, and these weren't set up as prospective clients or people I was going to work with or any of those things. They were just people that other people thought I should meet. They were cool people, and and I sat down with them, and it was phenomenal to me because it proved a theory that I'd had for years, and that is that the people at the very top, the people who are doing exceptionally well, have the least amount of ego, that they're actually there to serve. They've gone past, and each of them I had a conversation with talked about that they'd been egoic, but that they'd gotten to a place where they realized, what, I'm just here to serve, I'm here to do something. And from that place, they stopped looking at everybody as competition, whether they were above them, at the same level, and below them, and they just went to a place of service. And that, for me, is what I heard in what you were saying there, is that, that not looking at, well, yes, of course, we want to represent the prime minister, we want to represent the president, and that's, taking our game up. But at the same time, the qualification is not that you are head of NATO or something. The qualification is this heart-based experience that you bring to people.
Right. It's you look at the presidential election that's going on, and you just it's very hard to believe. This is not what people are like. No. not the people in this country, and the frustration that comes from the election is because people aren't like that, and they're just tired of those things happening. And I remember back in 1985, when we were just kind of getting some success, I got a letter from Lou Holtz, who was the football coach at Notre Dame at the time, and Lou had turned me down to represent him because he wanted to concentrate on football, and finally he sent me a second letter saying, I've agreed because my in-pile of speeches is this tall, and the football is a lot smaller, and I want to concentrate on football, so you take the big pile of speech requests. And he says, I'm going to do it on 3 conditions, and as long as I can trust you,
Mm-hmm.
As long as you care about me, and as long as you look for excellence in what you do. And I couldn't file that letter away. It sat on my desk, and I kept looking over and looking at it and reading it again. And I finally realized what was taking place. I was getting to a point where I was thinking, success is all I want. I mean, I've had a touch of success. We can really make this work. I can be, great and well known. And that letter brought me back to what the beginning reasons I wanted to start something on my own in the very first place.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally we do lose track. I mean, but there are moments in our lives where, we can say, why did I start this in the first place? What were my first ambitions? And most of us don't start things just because I want to make money or, I want to take pride in what they're doing and feel a sense of accomplishment. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you. What you said was right on, and I found the same experience.
Yeah. You talk a lot in the book. I mean, the book is based on these defining moments for these people. And I would like to share something here because I think that I'd like to actually get your input on it and your insights on it. Because as many of my viewers and listeners know, back in 1990, I had a defining moment, if you will, in that I fell off a mountain while free climbing. I was already at the top of my career, was doing awesomely well, and then I was free climbing because I was an adrenaline junkie, and fell 120 feet and got smashed to pieces on solid rock. My life as it was came to an end. Everything about me was destroyed, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, completely wiped out at every possible level. And one of the things that I speak about now, when I say, I believe, it's my belief, that all human beings have a fall. Now, some people's fall is quite literal, like mine. For some people, it's a bankruptcy, it's a bad diagnosis, it's the loss of a loved one. There's many different forms it can take. However, and this is my lesson to people, however, just because you fall doesn't mean you come back. My own quote is to say, once Humpty Dumpty's fallen, you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again the same as it was. And I find that a lot of people have these moments, these defining moments, as you call them, these falls, as I call them, and in that moment they say, that's it, I've got to change. I've missed the growing up of my kids, I've missed my marriage, whatever it is, my health, and I've got to change. And they make that commitment, but for most people, they go then right back to what they were doing before. They don't actually change. They believe they've changed, but they didn't actually. They repeated the cycle. And what I found is that the people who catapult into enormous amounts of shift and change and success are the ones who actually are reinvented by that experience. Something shifts dramatically. Tell us about, is that what you discovered in your finding out about these people?
I mean, that is the 34 stories in the book, and that is the basic theme of every story in the book. Something has taken place which changes the direction of where they are. Tony Blair who became Prime Minister of England. Tony Blair was a long-haired dropout who hitchhiked from his home to London, slept on the benches in London, and got a job in a music store, became a singer in a band, wanted to be exactly like Mick Jagger. He told me the story once about hearing that the brother of the chauffeur for the Beatles got this really hot date, and it was because he had a relationship. His brother had a relationship with the Beatles, and he says, "This is what I want to do with the rest of my life."
Right.
And his father, at the same time, on a different parallel, was running for Parliament and had a stroke, and they were very wealthy. And the stroke meant that his father was in the hospital for months upon months, unable to speak. They finally sent him home. He couldn't work anymore. He could never run for Parliament again. His life dream was gone. The money that they had, the wealth that Tony Blair took for granted and wanted to be a long-haired singer, probably had an influence on him. His mother sat beside his father for 4 months, teaching him word by word and syllable by syllable how to speak again. And Tony Blair came back and saw that, and that is what changed his life. Now, you can either come back and see it, and like you said, and you can ignore it, and you move on, and you don't care about it. But the people who are successful in life, who have accomplishment in life, and who become wiser and stronger are the ones that are able to identify that moment in their life and realize that that is basically who they are. I mean, we are a product of the people that bring us up and the environment in which we live in. And sometimes we lose track of those people and the character of who we really are. And so, you're exactly right. Your falling off the cliff was the same thing Tony Blair father did, fall off the cliff. And Tony saw it and changed his life, cut his hair, and went back to school. And he would have never done that if his father hadn't suffered and his mother didn't give him the example of I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to teach him to speak again. Yeah,
and as I said, that sometimes it's literal, like for me it was a physical fall. Sometimes it's somebody who's close to you, like you just talked about with Tony Blair's mom and dad. And sometimes it's an outer force. Sometimes it's a mentor, like you just talked about the lady in the book and the teacher who, took her off the subway and drove her hard until she was able to graduate from Harvard. That's pretty amazing. But at that same point, I think that when I look at that, as somebody who is an A-type personality, somebody who is a bit of a rebel, seen as a rebel, it's easy to go the other way. It's easy to go, screw you, I'm going to do this, with that willpower and it's a downward spiral because it becomes about trying to prove we are right rather than staying in touch with what I call our soul, with the passion, the truth of who we are. And did you find that was that like consistent with everybody that there was not just the event, but but what I'm looking at is this fork in the road where they could have gone that way. They maybe even felt the pull. Did you get into that with them where they talked about, I'm at this place, there's a fork in the road, and I felt like I could go this way, but I chose to go that way. And they could see those two paths.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Tom Brokaw, the well-known journalist, was a three-sport athlete in high school. He was the lead in the play. He grew up in the Midwest, and he was the head of the state, legislature for students, and guaranteed to succeed. The most, popular guy in high school.
Yeah.
Went to college, drank, loved women, flunked out of school. Some guy says, like a mentor comes along and says, I'm going to help you. Brings him back again, and the mentor takes a look at him and talks to him and sees what he's doing and says, throwing you out again because you're not heading in the right direction. And don't come back here until you're ready to head in the right direction. And so he kept being thrown out until he finally got the message. And the idea is that sometimes in that fork in the road, you have to sit at that fork for a second and think, where do I want to go in life? I mean, what do I want to do? And when the thing is, when you don't pay attention to it, then you take that wrong fork in the road and you do it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. I know it's probably an extraordinarily difficult question, but are there one or two stories in the book of these people in these defining moments that were very powerful for you personally, that hit you?
Well, the ones that hit me the most, I think, were the ones where people. There's a story in there about Stu Leonard's, which is, I have all kinds of people in the book. I don't just have a prime minister or a secretary of state, but the idea of what you were talking about earlier of having people that are all kinds of parts of life. And Stu Leonard's is probably one of the most successful grocery stores in the world and written up in a lot of different books. And so I represented him because he represented a great entrepreneurial spirit that's in this country. And he was putting up some lights right around the swimming pool when his little boy fell in the swimming pool, and he didn't notice it, and then went and went looking for him, and not knowing he was right beside him, in the swimming pool, and then when they came back out, it was too late, and the little boy died, and the pressure that puts on a family, to break up a marriage because you feel guilty and you take responsibility for it, or you blame the other person because of it. Those are the things that I think touched me the most. There's a thing in there with Bob Woodruff, who was at ABC, and he had just become the anchor for ABC, and he was in Iraq and was bombed, and half of his head was blown off, and he had just had the job at ABC as the anchorman for a couple months, and Judy Woodruff's son, who has a stent in his neck, and they have to replace it, and when they operate on him, the surgeon makes a mistake, and now he's paralyzed, and the family has to go through that. The ones that got to me the most, I think, were the ones where when you love your children, you could feel like something like that happens, and you don't know whether you could survive it. I mean, I say you have to. People always say I love change, but no, I don't love change when it comes my way.
Sure.
And so the same thing here is, I can overcome adversity, but can you?
Yeah.
When it strikes home that close to you.
Yeah, as Nito Quabain says, the only people who like change are the homeless people on the street and babies in dirty diapers.
Right.
Which I think is a very good way of putting it.
Right.
So like I said, I mean, you've got this list of enormous people in the book. People like Colin Powell, Terry Bradshaw, Tom Brokow, you just talked about, Alan Greenspan, CondoLeeza Rice, and so many others of these folks. But you got to know them, quote unquote, off stage. You got to meet them as people as well as these public personas. In your experience, was there a great deal of difference between the public persona and the private, if you will, unbutton your pants when you've eaten too much turkey person?
Right.
Was there a great deal of difference between those two personas?
The answer is no. I would have been disappointed if there was,
Right.
because if they were different when they got, then I would have thought about the hypocrisy of who I was representing.
Yeah.
So they weren't. I mean, they have to watch what they say on occasion like that. But I found most of them, had good qualities of leadership. I mean, they all had a vision of what they wanted to do, and I found generally the vision that they had, for what they wanted to do in life was a good vision.
Yes.
I mean, part of the reason I wrote the book, the examples in the book are older examples. These are people who are 40, 50, 60 years old. Mm-hmm. I actually wrote the book for kids starting out in life because it bothered me that that they didn't have good examples anymore. That we're dealing with social media and the examples of the people that are our heroes in social media. And as I said before, you look at the presidential election, it's so disappointing. I mean, I don't know what kids are thinking. I remember thinking when I was a teenager and John Kennedy was running, and he was inspirational to me. And sure, I guess he had personal problems with his life that you learn about later on, but at the same time, he was inspirational. And I just wonder where these kids are getting their inspiration from and their motivation to do well, and how they're learning to keep, is good character for them still important in life? Mm-hmm. Is that still something, that they care a whole lot about? And so I wrote the book because these people, generally speaking, had the same kind of personality and they were the same person both professionally and personally. There was no difference. I mean, they had good character. I didn't have too many politicians in the book, but there's one in there because I wanted to have an example of a politician, a guy named George Mitchell, who was Senator Mitchell. And Senator Mitchell, when you think about the way Congress is today and what a mess it is, and they don't really care. They care about themselves. They don't care about anybody else.
It's about the money.
And so George Mitchell he was the first one to introduce national health care legislation back in the 1990s. And at the same time, the one of the Supreme Court justices was retiring, and Bill Clinton calls George Mitchell on the phone and says, how would you like to become the next Supreme Court justice? I want to nominate you and you'll sail right through. And he says, I don't think if I lose focus on this bill, this national, I don't think it's going to pass because nobody's paying attention to it except for me. And he declined the offer.
Wow.
Now who would do that? I mean, who? And it ended up failing, and he ended up never getting asked again. But at the same time, I mean, would that just shows you the kind of character people really have in private, and that kind of story isn't out there in public, somebody saying, see what I did.
No.
This is what they do privately. And that's exactly what I found. I found these people, they've put me on the right course, generally speaking. They're the ones that I learned from.
Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And I actually wrote a dissertation on that to show the quantum physics of that we actually are. And having, and one of the things that I say to people is when you look at the 5 people you surround yourself with, they don't have to be 5 people who are physically there at a level of touch, but the 5 people who fill your head. And so the first 2 people who filled your head were your mom and your dad. And some of us didn't get great mom and dads or great models in that process. And some of the stuff that got inside is, that takes some time to extract. And the 5 people that surround you, are one of the things that I've recommended to people for years is you should make at least 1 or 2 of those people at any given time very highly successful people that you've never necessarily met. So by reading the biography of Martin Luther King or of Gandhi or of Oprah or of somebody that you look up to, that you see as a model, is vital. But unfortunately, we don't, as you very well pointed out, we live in a world of celebrity modeling. Kids who are saying, when you say to kids, what do you want to be? They say famous, as opposed to famous for. They want to be famous, period. So they want to be Kim Kardashian, who becomes famous for the size of her butt, versus being famous for Stephen Hawking for his theory on black holes, or something that is profound. And I think this is a very important point, and this was in our initial conversation before we decided to do this show, was my impetus of wanting you on was to have people go read this book, because what I like about the idea of it is you don't have to read the book. Just read about one person. Just pick one of those stories, read that one person. Let that rattle around in your brain. Let that be one of the 5 people for a little while, and take what you can from it, and then go to another one. If you're feeling like you want to be a rock star, but it's never going to happen for you, maybe you need to read the Tony Blair story. And you read that and you go, maybe this isn't my path, and find out what your true path is. Because I think we desperately, desperately, desperately need models. And so we hit these walls, we have the falls, we have those massive turning moments, but very often people go, it's over, and they don't know where else to look. And the idea that you've laid out in this that I love is that it's letting people know these moments are not stop signs. They're not hitting the wall. They are putting the brakes on so you get to make another decision and have another greater influence. And I love that about it.
Right. The odd thing I found out, when I go and sign books for people, half of the books I'm signing, they're making it out to one of their children.
Yes.
Which I find incredible. And if I can't reach these young people because people see the name of somebody that's on the book and they say, well, I don't even know who that is, then I can reach it through their parents and their grandparents. Because, I mean, it's that idea of that fork in the road you were talking about. I mean, we can make the decision to go the right fork in the road if we have those 5 people in our heads, telling us which way to go.
Yeah, and it's just so important. Bernie, it's been absolutely fabulous having you on the show. I'm really grateful to have you on the show.
Oh, I am too. I'm sorry. You said to me, this was going to be like just sitting in a pub and having a beer. It's a shame we didn't have a beer, but maybe next time.
Maybe we can do that. I would like for you to tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find out more about you, about the book, etc.
Good. Well, the book is on Amazon, and it's on sale on Amazon. And if you get it, I'd love for you to write a review, because that's important. And the thing for me is, if you do like the book or like the stories in the book, if you could just share it with other people on social media, kind of expand the network for me a little bit, because I'm unknown. I've just kind of been hiding away for a while, and I'd love to share these stories, and I'd love to have them do good and feel about, the way I feel. I would like other people to feel the same way.
So the best place to get the book?
Amazon, and you can go on bernie.swain.com, and you can see a lot of the stories, some of the blogs that I've posted, and some of the articles that have been written. So that'll give you a lot of information as well.
And remind our listeners and viewers the name of the book.
Name of the book is What Made Me Who I Am.
What Made Me Who I Am.
What Made Me Who I Am, and again, it's on Amazon, and I hope people enjoy it, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Hey, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been a real pleasure. I really say this all the time, and I think it's really important that people listen to podcasts in the background. I think it's really important to stop, take notes, pay attention. Bernie's brought you some really great insights here, and I really hope that you'll take them to heart and put them in action. Bernie, I'm going to sign off and say goodbye to everybody. I hope you'll stay with me for a minute more, and I'll come back to you at the end. Great. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Bernie for our guest, Bernie Swain, and for speaking to us about these amazing people and these amazing stories. And I really do hope that you'll go out and get that book, because I'm inspired by it. I've got it, and some of these stories are amazing. So you really got to dig in. As I said, you can find those 5 people inside that book. Let different people in your head, because I guarantee you there's a lot of people inside of your head who really shouldn't be there. However, I want to thank Bernie. I want to thank you for tuning in. And if you are serious about having the kind of laser beam clarity that will cause massive positive disruption, that builds a culture, that develops the next generation of leaders, and not only into who they want to be, but who they need to be, and to have them become evangelical about your organization, about your purpose, and create that 10x engagement and productivity, reach out to me. My name is Dov Baron, DOVBARON. You can find out more about me at fullmontyleadership.com. You also stop by the Matrix, like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and you can get my Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's a $197 value. You get it absolutely free by going to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and really find out where your true strengths are in leadership. I want to thank you for joining us here at Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty Leadership interview series. Again, I'm your host, Dov Baron. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody that you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please go to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And come on over and subscribe now on YouTube. Connect with us on LinkedIn, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at @TheDovBaron. And I publish new blogs, new posts, new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, so look out for those. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the fork in the road. Which way you're going to go? And who are the 5 people you're going to let into your head? Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I